Which running backs should you start or sit in week one of the fantasy football season? We're going to go game by game to tell you which running backs should be in your lineup. But first, a quick announcement.
FlockFantasy.com/endgame is the ultimate cheat code for your fantasy football season. Gain the edge with our top-notch draft rankings plus our weekly in-season rankings. And get access to our secret knowledge with our bonus articles and videos that you cannot find anywhere else. And as a special bonus, you can show off your fantasy skills in style by wearing one of our classy Endgame t-shirts for free just by being a member. Sign up now at flockfantasy.com/endgame and get an amazing 30% off your subscription.
All right, let's get to those running backs. Let's start out with those guys that you really don't have to decide. They are must start no matter what. Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, and Josh Jacobs. All right, let's kick it off with the first game. That would be the Thursday night game between the Lions and the Chiefs. Now, the Lions is a good place to start because we have a very interesting name here is rookie Jahmyr Gibbs, who's drafted a lot earlier than some people expected. Are you putting him right into your fantasy lineup first thing?
I think you have to. I mean, you drafted him in the third, fourth round of your draft. It's the Chiefs. It should be an absolute shootout, a high-scoring game. He's going to catch a ton of passes. In this matchup, I think you have to start Jahmyr Gibbs this week.
You said it. Look, I don't know how many yards he'll run for, and I don't think it matters because pretty much his appeal throughout the season will be as a pass catcher and in a game where the Chiefs are probably going to be ahead at some point, I would guess, and it's in Arrowhead. He's going to get a lot of receptions, I think, and don't forget Jameson Williams is out, so they're going to need Gibbs to do something. So I like him a lot in this matchup. Now, what about David Montgomery, the other running back there?
Yeah, I don't feel quite as good about him. I think he'll get more work than Jahmyr Gibbs, but like you said, game script could work against him. He probably is going to need a touchdown, but in this game where there's probably going to be a lot of points, he certainly has a chance to score and do some damage. So don't feel quite as strongly about him, but I think as like an RB2, he's a solid start this week.
It's not an apples to apples comparison, but you think of last year's Detroit Lions running back Jamal Williams, who was mainly the short yards goal line back, and then David Montgomery taking his place. I think in this game, like several games this season, maybe not everyone, I think he's going to be touchdown dependent. I'm not expecting a huge rushing performance from him. He's not going to be the guy catching all the passes out of the backfield. It's going to be Gibbs. So he's kind of a start if you need type of player. And then what about on the Chiefs? I mean, probably the only guy worth talking about is Isaiah Pacheco, who's expected to be the lead running back.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are going to look at this and see the Lions and be like, oh my gosh, you have to start Pacheco. But that Lions running defense got really good over the second half of last season. So I don't think this is as much of a smash matchup as it looks like. But still, Pacheco, the lead back here. He's got speed. He's got potential. Again, kind of touchdown dependent like Montgomery. So I'm going to put him in that start him if you need him kind of category.
I'm going to go a little bit lower, and I'm just generally a little bit lower on Chiefs running backs. But remember, Pacheco been banged up all offseason, had a hand issues, a shoulder thing, hadn't got a lot of time in with the ones, and we will see other running backs like Jerick McKinnon, and yes, maybe even Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, Pacheco, I think you didn't draft him as a starting running back. I hope you only drafted him as like your third running back, and so I'm not putting him in my lineup unless it's a very deep league. All right, and then to kick things off on Sunday morning, start with the Panthers at the Falcons. Some exciting rookies there. Let's start with, you're already starting Bijan Robinson for the Falcons, aren't you? If you have a Panthers running back, it's probably Miles Sanders. Is he start worthy?
Yeah, I think you have to start Miles Sanders. I know we didn't see him in the preseason, but he should be fully healthy now. Workhorse running back here. I think the Falcons defense is going to be better than it was last year, but it doesn't scare me. Miles Sanders, pretty much a must start.
Only thing that might give me pause with Sanders is if that groin injury that he suffered, during training camp not long ago, if that lingers, but it doesn't sound like it is. So if he's all systems go for week one, then I think he's a solid start against this Falcons not too impressive defense. Now we know Bijan is the guy in Atlanta, but is Tyler Algier still a guy who's just a handcuff, or do you think he could have some standalone value?
I think he could have some standalone value, but not this week. The Panthers defense isn't terrible. I think they're going to be pretty good this year. This isn't the matchup where I like Algier, so There are going to be some weeks where I'm going to say, yeah, you can probably start him this week. This isn't it. I'm sitting him.
Yeah, same here. Again, there's no reason you shouldn't have at least 2 or 3 running backs better than Algier on your team at this point. So there's no need to put him in any lineups. Texans going against the Ravens here in Baltimore. Dameon Pierce looks like he's set for a workhorse role in Houston. Does that make him an automatic start?
I think it does. I mean, if you drafted Dameon Pierce, he looks like a solid RB2 with upside, playing all the third down snaps, which is great, which means he has potential to catch more passes this year. I think if you got Dameon Pierce, unless you have a way better option, you pretty much have to start him.
Yeah, I've been big on Pierce throughout draft season. Definitely putting in there very rock solid RB2. Not a great matchup for him, but volume is king when it comes to running backs. And speaking of, J.K. Dobbins looks like he's clearly the guy for Baltimore. How do you feel about him, though?
Feel great about him. He's going against Houston, one of the worst run defenses, like historically over the last few years. I don't expect him to be much better this year. And I love his line on underdog higher than 56.5 rushing yards. Really, 56.5. He went over that in each of the last 5 games last year, and now he's fully healthy in a great matchup. So not only do I love his line on underdog, but I love him in your fantasy leagues. J.K. Dobbins, a must start this week.
I love him too. Same thing, high on him throughout the draft process. If you got him, you should be starting him anyways, but this is such a smash spot for him. Definitely got to start him. Bengals facing the Browns. So Joe Mixon is no longer an automatic must start, but is he someone you would consider this week?
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, he's going to get the volume. It's the Browns. Not a great run defense. Joe Mixon, if you got him, he's solid. You start him.
Well, if you got him, then obviously you still have some faith with him. I don't have any Mixon this year, and I'm okay with that. But, there are still believers out there. Look, I just said volume is king. It's true. He's going to get pretty much all the touches, including a lot of that receiving work out of the backfield. He always has touchdown upside. So if you did draft him, then you're probably going to roll with him. All right, now it gets a little interesting. Let's talk about the Jaguars at Colts, which on paper wouldn't seem to be the best matchup of the week, but in fantasy, a lot of questions. But let's start with Travis Etienne. Some people consider him a must start. I'm not there. Are you?
I mean, not a must start in the sense that you just ignore the matchup and put him in your lineup, but I think he's another good start this week. He's a talented player. He's an explosive player. He can always rip off long runs, long catches, has decent touchdown upside. I'm not super scared of the Colts defense. I think if you got Etienne, you're starting him this week.
Well, I was a little skeptical about him throughout this offseason, and I'm not sure exactly what his usage will be, but I'll say that this week, it doesn't matter. In week 1, I love Travis Etienne, and I'm definitely putting him in all lineups. In fact, he might be one of my favorite running back picks of the week. Reason I wasn't as high on Etienne draft season was because I love Tank Bigsby, and he's been very involved this preseason, but how involved is he in the season opener?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I can trust him in my lineup week 1. I mean, I'm not going to go off of what he did in the preseason. The first 2 weeks in the preseason was with the backups against backups. He's looked good. He's a talented player, but man, in my lineup week 1, that's too risky. I'm sitting him this week.
Even the highest of rookie RBs who get drafted are slow played into things. It's just how it is. Things are totally different than they used to be in the NFL. Rookie quarterbacks don't sit. They're just thrown into the fire week 1. Rookie running backs are brought along a lot more slowly. And so they already have Etienne and Bigsby, although he did get a lot of preseason run. I don't think fumbling near the goal line helped him in his last game. Didn't help his cause. So I like him long term, but not this week. All right, now time for the Colts backfield, which is suddenly without their lead back, Jonathan Taylor, just as we all expected, right? So who's going to fill the void? Well, not Kenyon Drake. He got cut. It's going to be maybe a couple of guys, starting with Deion Jackson, who was there last year. Didn't really perform too spectacularly, although he did have his moments. Are you going to trust him?
No way. I mean, if you got him on your bench, that's great. See what happens. See how this backfield plays out. But no way am I putting Deion Jackson in my lineup week 1 with this uncertainty. You should have better options. Keep him on your bench. Wait to see what happens, but don't start him this week.
Honestly, I'd be surprised if many people even have Deion Jackson rostered unless you went out and scooped him up off waivers just yesterday. But even so, there's no way you shouldn't have a lot better options. If it was mid-season, there were buys and injuries and all that, I could understand, like what happened last year with Deion Jackson. I mean, look, maybe he does have one of those games where he catches 8 dump-off passes because they're losing by so much. But it doesn't matter. You should not have him in your lineup. Anything different with rookie Evan Hull, who a lot of people liked throughout this preseason draft process, and some people think could eventually be the lead back in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I'm one of those people, but I'm also one of those people who's not starting him in week 1. Same thing I said about Deion Jackson. If you got him on your bench, great, see what happens, but don't put him in your lineup this week.
No. Stash, sure. Start, don't even think about it. Tampa Bay is going to Minnesota. Let's see what happens with Rachaad White, a guy we've been talking about a lot again this offseason. What do you expect from him?
I expect a great game. I mean, there are some concerns here, like the offense might not be very good and the offensive line might not be very good, but they're playing the Minnesota Vikings, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. He's going to catch a ton of passes. In that last preseason game where he finally played with Baker Mayfield, he played every single starter snap. He's a clear workhorse here. I think if you had Rachaad White, you have to start him this week.
I expect near bell cow usage because even if you don't look at him that way, I think Tampa Bay does. And honestly, name off more than one or two of the other running backs that they have behind Rachaad White. It's going to be him, and not just as the runner, but also as what he does best as a receiver. And so even if he doesn't have a huge game, to me, when I look at the pick'ems for week 1 on Underdog, it is just a no-brainer. 66.5 total yards rushing and receiving. I mean, I think I could do that just in a typical game against any opponent, even a decent defense. And then we're talking about Minnesota, which we know is still going to have one of the worst defensive units this season. I mean, to me, just really obvious pick there. So I love Rachaad White in this matchup. And look, you pair your Dobbins pick and the Rachaad White pick there, you triple your money easily on Underdog. If you're not signed up, by the way, this is a good time to mention promo code ENDGAME. You get a 100% deposit match just like that. And then on the other side, well, it's Alexander Madison's time to prove that he can be the guy in Minnesota. Do you think he'll do it against Tampa?
Probably not. I mean, this Bucs defense isn't quite the, vaunted run-stopping defense we've seen of years past, but it's still pretty good. I don't think Alexander Madison is going to run wild all over this defense. I mean, he will have game script on his side, probably, but that's pretty much about it. So for me, Alexander Madison this week is nothing more than like, if you need him, you can start him, but not a guy I feel like you have to start.
Very risky here. I could see this going either way. Like I said, Tampa Bay is still a solid run defense. Minnesota, moreover, though, is just not a great rushing offense. Dalvin Cook kind of got away with a lot because he had that breakaway ability, those long runs. I don't know if Madison is quite that guy, which is why he's been stuck behind Dalvin Cook. So risky to me, kind of a high-end RB3, but I'm hoping you don't have to start him. All right, Titans are going to play the Saints. No Alvin Kamara, at least for 3 games. And so looks like a combo of a rookie and a vet. Let's start with the guy who's the starter, Jamaal Williams. Different situation. Do you think he can get similar results in New Orleans?
This week he might be able to because it's the Titans. They're not very good. They don't have a great defense. But Jamaal Williams isn't a guy like you're going to count on to get 100+ yards and catch a bunch of passes. So, touchdown dependent. He could score in this matchup, but definitely not a guy I feel like I have to start. I'm going to put him in that if you need him, you can start him category, but not a guy I love this week.
Yeah, exactly. And it's week 1. You shouldn't need him. You really should have drafted another running back before him as your second guy, maybe even as your third guy before him. So Williams, I think he'll be okay, especially looking at a standard league if he scores a touchdown, but most of the time you probably should just pass. And then Kendre Miller, a guy I know you liked a lot throughout this offseason. What do you think he can show in his first game?
I'm not expecting a lot. He hasn't looked great in the preseason. Now, granted, he's played with the second and third string offensive line, so he hasn't really had opportunity to play with the starting offensive line, but I don't think they're going to rely on him too much as a rookie. You talked about it with Tank. I think it's going to be mostly Jamaal Williams, so not starting Kendre Miller this week.
Yeah, there's only 2 rookie running backs I would even consider starting this week, and you know who they are. They're the 2 first-round picks. So, yeah, Miller, I think, will be good long-term, but there's no chance I would trust him this week. Niners taking on the Steelers. Well, Najee Harris kind of let us down last year, not going to lie. Do you think he can turn it around? This is not a great matchup for him defensively.
No, it's not. But I mean, you drafted him, third round, maybe fourth round of your draft. We know he's going to get the volume. I think if you have Najee Harris, you kind of just have to roll with him and take whatever you get, but it could be a letdown week.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, you can't expect a huge game out of him, but you just kind of have to keep him out there for his floor. And there's a lot of noise about Jalen Warren. I don't know why everybody loves Jalen Warren so much. Look, guy's talented, but this is Najee's backfield. Let's not make any mistakes. Warren's making all these preseason highlights because he's playing in the preseason because he's not the starter. So I think Najee will be okay this week, but you pretty much have to start him. Cardinals at the Commanders. So in Arizona, it's going to be all James Conner, maybe just completely James Conner on offense because I'm not sure what else they've got going on there. So does that make him an appealing choice?
Kind of feels like Najee Harris this week to me. Like, we know he's going to get the volume. They're probably going to lean on him, but it's the Commanders. They have a good run defense. This offense is going to be terrible right now with whoever the quarterback is going to be. So Connor, to me, another guy where it's like, if you absolutely have to, you don't have a better option, you can put him in there because he's going to get the volume, but not a must-start type of guy.
Yeah, I think Connor's going to get a ton of usage this week, especially, well, probably the first few weeks while Kyler Murray is out, if not longer. I don't mind Connor this week. Look, and I didn't draft a lot of him. I kind of don't want too much of this Arizona offense this season. But look, if you have Connor, you got him as a late RB2, I think he's a solid option. And then for the Commanders, you got two running backs of interest. Let's start with Brian Robinson, who I guess is the technical starter at running back.
Yeah, in this matchup against this Cardinals defense that I can only name one player, I think you have to start Brian Robinson this week, especially if he's going to catch passes like we saw in the preseason. I mean, I'm not going to say a must start. There are running backs I like more than him, but certainly one of the better, running back starts this week.
I mean, it's hard to call a guy who was drafted around pick 100, typically as a third or even fourth running back, a must start. But I love Robinson. I've talked about him a lot this offseason. And this matchup, it really can't get any better because I think Arizona's defense is going to be the worst in the league. So if there's a time I'm going to call him a must start and pick out a guy from, lower in the depth chart, this is it. I love Robinson this week. And on that note, look, I think Antonio Gibson also has value at the same time.
I agree. Again, not going to say like you have to start these guys, but if you're in a pinch, I think Antonio Gibson will also be a good start this week.
Packers at the Bears. Well, Aaron Rodgers is not there in Green Bay anymore, but Aaron Jones still is, so I guess that makes him now the new owner of Chicago. I don't know. He tends to do pretty well against them. You think that continues this year?
I think he'll do okay. I think he's a solid start this week. I mean, it's the Bears. Their defense has certainly gotten better than what we've been used to in recent years, but I don't think they're going to be one of the, better defenses, like an elite defense. So I think if you drafted Aaron Jones, you're probably starting him this week.
I think there's a lot of potential for Aaron Jones to have a big game. And look, it's early in the season, so we know he's healthy. So I really like him. I think he's a really solid start. And then A.J. Dillon, I do think he does better than last year. I don't know if I'll go so far as to say I would start him this week. I think we just kind of need to wait and see some more.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if we're looking at like kind of later round running backs, I'd much prefer either of the Commanders running backs over A.J. Dillon. If you're somehow in a pinch and you're desperate, which you shouldn't be, it's week 1, then he's startable, but I'd prefer to keep him on my bench this week.
Now, the Bears' backfield is going to be interesting, but I know that lately you've been showing some more interest in Khalil Herbert. Does that start right here, right now?
I think so. He looks like the clear lead back. He looks like he's going to get the bulk of the touches here, the bulk of the snaps. Packers historically not been a great run defense, much better against the pass than the run, so I like Khalil Herbert this week. Again, not a must start, but a decent start if you need him.
I think he's a great start on a 0 RB team that waited and, maybe you plug him as your second guy. Another thing with Herbert is, first of all, he's not going to get all the touches, but also I don't like that he's limited as a pass catcher. And by limited, I mean he does not catch any passes. But that's just how this Bears offense is going to be. I think Herbert is a guy who has a definite shot to hit a home run, but you know what? It's not guaranteed. And then rookie Rashawn Johnson might be that third down receiving back, but is that enough?
No, again, I'm going to like to with the other rookies outside of Bijan and Gibbs, not starting Rashawn Johnson this week. No way.
No, there's no way. Hold on to him, like keep him on your bench, but don't expect much. Raiders taking on the Broncos. Well, on the Raiders side, it's easy now. They got their guy back. The Broncos, not so simple. Javonte Williams is playing, but some major trust issues there with the knee. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't see how you can start him this week. I know it's the Raiders. It seems like a good matchup, but I can't see Javonte Williams playing a huge amount of snaps this week. First game from the knee. They're not going to throw him out there and just instantly give him 70% of the snaps. So I think he got to sit Javonte Williams this week.
Yeah, everyone's all excited about him playing. Look, it's great, but again, it's not even just the amount of touches and volume he gets. It's the efficiency. We've been saying this throughout the entire summer. Even if he's out there and gets 20 carries, are we expecting 4.5, 5 yards a carry? He's never even been that guy. So, if I have Javonte, which I don't, I'm not starting him. Now, we do have a fair amount of Samaje Perine. We've been talking him up, but is he startable?
I don't think so, because just the fact that Javonte is playing means he's probably not going to get the volume he needs. There's a lot of risk here. What if Sean Payton does say, hey, let's give Javonte Williams, 50% of the snaps first game back from ACL or something? I think there's just too much risk for Samaje Perine this week. You should have better options. I'm sitting him.
Perine actually got a little more interesting for me with the Jerry Jeudy injury because, maybe they just have to rely on him a little bit more for some of those dump offs. But it's just, there's not high enough ceiling for me to start him in any league because Javonte is there. All right, the Miami Dolphins are going to the West Coast to play the Chargers in week 1. No JT, so, it's probably going to be sort of a committee, and I think it's going to be headed by Raheem Mostert. I know everyone's all excited about the rookie, but, Mostert might even be the smarter play.
Yeah, I think Mostert will be the starter this week. It's a great matchup. It's the Chargers, right? One of the worst run defenses. We know Mostert has the ability to hit home runs. Again, I can't sit here and say Raheem Mostert is a must start this week. He's startable if you need him, but honestly, you shouldn't really need Raheem Mostert either.
Yeah, he's more like a sneaky flex play if you're in a deep league. I think a great DFS play, right? A great guy that you can pick on an underdog, slate or something like that. But in a regular redraft league, that's a little too risky. Now, a lot of people love Devon Achane. I guess I'm one of them. But even I would say I'm not starting week 1. I know the shoulder isn't even the reason. It's just, look, he's not going to be the guy right off the bat, even if he ever is the guy there.
Exactly. Love the matchup. He could always hit a home run, but you're really just banking on that home run. Can't start him this week.
Here's an interesting matchup. The Philadelphia Eagles going to New England to take on the Pats. And they got a new running back. His name is DeAndre Swift. What do you expect on the road in Foxborough? Does he come out of the gate hot?
Yeah, I don't know. This is a tough matchup on the road. A great defense. Again, it's week 1. I feel like you should probably have better running backs that we've already talked about. If you don't, I think he's fine. He's startable. But he's not a guy I feel like you have to start this week.
This might be the toughest call for me this week, honestly, because I drafted DeAndre Swift quite a bit, not just in our mocks, but in some real leagues as my RB2 if I waited. I think he still has that huge upside, but this is such an ugly matchup on the road against a really tough defense that knows how to shut down the run. So I'm not going to say he's a must sit, but it's just kind of a risky RB2. So if you are depending on him as your second running back and you don't have another guy we've talked about that we like a lot better, then he's startable. And then the Pats have Ramondre Stevenson, who, look, for me, he's a no doubt must start. But what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Eagles defense going to be good again this year, but we know he'll catch passes. He's an efficient, explosive runner. I think if you drafted Ramondre Stevenson, you're starting Ramondre Stevenson this week.
And got to get your take on this guy. The Pats have a backup running back by the name of Ezekiel Elliott. Do you have any feelings towards him?
Yeah, and they're not good. Against a tough defense, he needs to fall in the end zone to have any value. It's week 1. You shouldn't need to start Ezekiel Elliott. Not starting Ezekiel Elliott this week.
You definitely should not be considering Zeke. If you do even have him rostered. All right, Rams at Seahawks, Cam Akers. I'm a fan. Are you a fan this week in Seattle, which is a tough venue?
It's a tough venue, but they've been pretty bad against the run in recent years. I don't see that getting significantly better. He'll get a decent amount of volume. Maybe he won't catch a ton of passes, but enough volume here, potential to score a touchdown. I think as an RB2, he's a solid start.
Agree. A very good start. Not necessarily one of my favorite RBs this week, but I think he'll be rock solid. There's really no reason to bench him. And then in Seattle, Kenneth Walker, well, not like last year where he was like a no-doubter, but he's got some competition now. Do you think that Walker against the Rams, is there any doubt as far as putting him in your lineup?
I mean, there's probably some doubt, but I think you still have to start him. You probably drafted him as your high-end RB2 more than likely, so it's not the worst matchup in the world. He's a talented guy. He's an explosive guy. Yeah, Charbonnet will probably be involved a bit, but like we've been talking about, I don't think Charbonnet is going to have a huge role week 1. So I think this week, Kenneth Walker is a solid start.
I actually think he's a great start this week because don't expect Charbonnet to get a ton of touches right away. And the Rams defense is not nearly what we remember from that Super Bowl season. I mean, they got Aaron Donald still, and that's kind of it. I mean, I know he's not going to let anybody just run wild for him, but yeah, Walker, I think, is a great start. He has that big play ability. I don't think the Seahawks are going to be trailing much in this game, if at all, so I like Walker. And then I kind of already said at Charbonnet, I don't expect a lot. Don't think he really has fantasy value just yet.
Yeah, I agree. Can't start Charbonnet this week.
And then week 1 ends in New York. Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets. We get to see Aaron Rodgers debut. So let's talk about the Buffalo backfield. It's led by James Cook right now. So how do you feel he will do against this tough Jets defense?
Yeah, you're right. The Jets have one of the best defenses, but what I like about James Cook is he's not a guy who's going to be relied upon to, pick up those tough yards or run between the tackles. He's going to get out in space. He's going to be out there on, more like obvious passing downs where if they do give him the ball, it's going to be light boxes. He's going to catch passes. But at the same time, this isn't the best matchup. It's week 1. I would hope you have better options than James Cook. Nothing more than like if you need him, you can start him, but that's about it.
Yeah, in most leagues, he wasn't drafted to be a starter in a 12-team league, only if you really waited at running back. So I think he's okay this week, but it's definitely not the best scenario for him. And then Damian Harris looks like resuming his role as the RB2 and goal line vulture. Any value for him?
Touchdown. That's it. He needs to score a touchdown. I don't see him having a big yardage day here. We know he's not going to catch any passes. Touchdown or bust for Damian Harris. You shouldn't need a guy like that in week 1. I'm sitting him.
Yeah, I kind of feel like all season, Harris will be that like break glass in case of emergency for an injury or bye or something. If you need him, you can throw him in there, but not here, not now. And then the Jets will be interesting to see how this backfield looks early in the season. They got Dalvin Cook. Are they going to use Dalvin Cook?
I think so. I mean, like we talked about with Javonte, I think the Jets are going to slow play Breece a little bit. I think Dalvin Cook will mostly be the guy, but that doesn't necessarily excite me in this matchup. I think he's another guy. He's okay. If you need him this week, you can start him, but not a must start.
I wasn't too thrilled about getting Dalvin Cook in fantasy this year. The fact he went to the Jets made no difference to me. Going against the Buffalo defense definitely doesn't get me going. So I would prefer not to put him in a starting lineup if I had a different choice. And then there's Breece Hall. I mean, look, some people drafted him 3rd, 4th round pretty early. Some even as their top running back. I mean, should they be starting him?
No way would I start him this week. I don't think he sees more than 30-40% of the snaps. The Jets are being really careful with him. Cannot start Breece Hall this week.
No, should not start Breece Hall, and this is why I did not draft Breece Hall. I think a lot of people are going to be pretty disappointed early on. Now you know which running backs to start, but you got to get it right at every position in your lineup. Check out this playlist for all the best start-sit advice.